I spoke to Jim Ferguson, author and poet, and Jim will tell you a bit about himself and about the book launch which he's doing next week in Glasgow. That's going to be on Tuesday. Well, here's Jim to tell you all about it. Jim Ferguson, who's a Glasgow poet. Now, Jim has a volume coming out soon and a release for that special evening next week. So we'll talk about that in a couple of minutes, Jim. But first of all, good morning or good evening whenever you're listening to the show. Hello, Jim. Thanks
hello,
for joining
Stuart.
us.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me. Really lovely.
We haven't met for a while. You used to run some literary evenings out at the East End, and myself and Janet Hill, who's also in the News for Scotland team, used to attend that. But that, of course, all stopped with COVID. So I guess you're busy again. You're doing more performance events in Glasgow now.
I mean, it's roughly the same group of people. For about the last year and a half now, we've been doing the last Tuesday of each month at the Scotia Bar in Stockwell Street. It's quite a free and easy kind of night, but we have a good mixture of music and poetry. I usually try to MC it and introduce various acts and all that. And we take people on, people just come in for the street and we want to do a poem while they're passing and so forth. So it can be quite raucous and so forth, but it's really enjoyable. And there's myself, Derek Brown, Carol Yamnayad, Brian McFall, Trevor Lakey, Ewan Hare, and Louise Malone. There's about 6 or 7 years that all sort of taken to take the day of running it, and we called ourselves the Glasgow Literary Lounge. And as you said earlier, we started off at the Carlton Bar in the East End, but that sort of came to a natural end with COVID, and when our great leader Ruby McCann died, which was really, really sad, to be honest. But anyway, after Ruby died and the COVID thing happened, we decided that we wouldn't do the nights in the Carlton Bar anymore, and we'd just find a new venue to do them in. So we ended up at this Bing Bong. So we ended up at the Scotia Bar, and that's where, as I say, that's where we've been for about the last year and a half.
Yeah, you're a busy guy. Everyone's trying to talk to you this morning.
You always hope that nobody will phone you while you're being recorded, but people invariably do. So that was that. I mean, as to myself, I kind of started off doing poetry in the 1980s. I went to the Paisley Writers Group, which at that time was run by Tom Leonard, and I met Graham Fulton there and Bobby Christie. Margaret Fulton Cook, Christine McCammon, quite a lot. For a writers group, it was very, very poet heavy. There weren't very many short story writers or novelists or anything, although Jeff Torrington used to come along now and again. So that was all well and good and everything, and that was where I sort of started in the mid-80s in Paisley. Later on, I went to Glasgow Uni and did their creative writing master's course. It wasn't. I mean, it was quite a nice thing, Glasgow Uni. It was quite interesting. A good place to meet poets for other countries and writers for other countries if you're interested in meeting, broadening your social horizons. But and I enjoyed that as well. And strangely enough, when I was doing it, Alistair Gray was one of my kind of supervisors there, so that was really great fun because Alistair was such an interesting character and bubbly and enjoyable and everything. So I had really quite a good time at Glasgow Uni. And after I did the Masters, I went on to do a PhD, which was a study of the life and work of the Paisley poet and lyricist Robert Tannahill. Tannahill was born in 1774 and died in 1810, so he had quite a short life. He was about in his 33rd or 34th year when he died. Committed suicide, unfortunately, but he was prone to depression.
I was just saying before we started the recording ages ago, so I used to live in England actually, and from afar I thought to myself, I'd like to find out a bit more about Tannahill, because I went to school in Paisley, and school teachers used to say, we used to have this Weaver poet, but we never really got any of his poetry. And it seems that he disappeared, actually. I'd read, when I got this wee book out of the Paisley Library donkeys years ago, that up until the Second World War, there was quite a lot of interest in Tannahill. In fact, choirs used to meet up the Glen of Braes, but that all stopped at World War II and it hasn't been revived again. So I think in my generation, people used to say, "Oh yeah, there was Tannehill. He's a poet. He's got his statue outside the Town Hall," but nobody ever actually knows his verses. So also, he's a weaver poet. There's just a tradition in the west of Scotland
Well,
of working class people thinking poetry's for us.
well, there are a lot of weavers seemed to, they had a high level of literacy for some reason. It seemed to be a thing with weavers that they were very interested in education and so forth. Kind of, like that's going right back to the late 1700s. Say around about the 1790s or the 1780s and so forth. But you've got the American War of Independence or American Revolution and the French Revolution, and they were huge political events that had a big influence in the Scottish weaving community, and it's that's how they tend to have they're seen as kind of political radicals and all that, but they really took their radicalism from the American War of Independence and the French Revolution, and were kind of support. So they would tend to be Republicans rather than monarchists. And immediately, as soon as you get into that stage, you're oppositional to the kind of mainstream of what we would call British society. Even now to this day, as soon as you take a kind of Republican stance, you're set in opposition to the mainstream culture. So you end up having to educate yourself to argue, I suppose, to argue your position. And so the weavers, the Paisley weavers were like that. And there was strangely enough, a similar group of weavers in Northern Ireland and Antrim and Down who were very, very radical. And there was quite a lot of cross-fertilisation between the Northern Irish weavers and the West of Scotland weavers.
No, I wasn't aware of that. Funnily enough, I came across something to do with Paisley a couple of weeks ago. I went to a meeting where Mary McCabe, the writer, was talking about the
Oh, aye,
1820s and that period of that
that's
radical period, not only in Scotland but also in Northern England. But she was quoting government people's. On one hand, they wanted to get people into the army to fight Napoleon, but on the other hand, Tory ministers were saying, "Be very careful about arming people in Paisley." You don't know who they're going to use the arms against.
Well, I mean, even in Tannehill's lifetime, they had they'd get troops in from Glasgow to kind of quell the Paisley Weavers. This is around about 1808 and so forth, because they had a strike for over wages and so forth. But it's an interest. There was these guys. They called them corks. See, like a cork, like you put in the top of a bottle. They were like middlemen. They were like because it was a cottage industry at that time. It was before the mills, and people actually worked in their homes. They had a loom, a room with maybe 2 or 3 looms in it, and people actually worked in their homes back then. And these guys would come round once a week and collect the cloth that you had made, and they paid you. They were supposed to weigh however much cloth you had, and you get paid by the weight. But if you were a lace maker, lace doesn't weigh anywhere near as much, if you know what I mean.
It's full of
No,
holes.
so if you were making lace things, they would try and sort of, basically the merchants, the corks would try and undercut, all that, and that's where they have the thing. Just anyway, that was a whole wage dispute, and it became a kind of a small riot in Paisley in the early 1800s. That's before the kind of radicalism of the 1820s and so forth. That was actually, and it was actually
I
during
see.
the Napoleonic Wars when the oppression was even stronger. If you really disagreed with the kind of British line, then they were sending the army in. And in a lot of ways, that's why a lot of poets had to be very circumspect in their use of language, and because you could get deported for treason, you could get sent to Australia or whatever, or these kind of things, or you could get the jail, like Alexander Wilson, who's another Paisley poet. His statue is right beside Tannhill's. He had been in the jail for about a month, I think, Wilson, and they let him out to go to trial and all that, but he absconded. He absconded to America and went away in a boat rather than face. And this was because he wrote a poem about a mill owner called William Sharp, a satire on him. Anyway, he compared him with a big jobby.
Right. Okay.
Getting the jail for writing a poem at somebody in which you compare him to a big job is.
Imagine that. Imagine living in a time when a metaphor gets you jailed. Right, well, let's just move on quickly to what's happening next Tuesday. Have you a
I
new book
have.
out just now? Is that what you're launching at the
I've got a
Scotia?
kind of collection. This Tuesday coming, I'm going to have a small book launch for it's a sequence of poems called Double Vision, Double Voice. All of these, which actually you can hear them on YouTube actually, but with music. But anyway, I'm going to have a launch for that, and we're having a wee tribute to the Portuguese poet Fernando Pessoa. If anybody's ever heard of him, he won the Nobel Prize. I think he's the only Portuguese Nobel Prize for literature winner. And a wee tribute to him. And then we have an open mic, and the open mic consists of music and poets. So it's just a kind of jamboree of music and poetry. We book launch and a wee tribute to Fernando Pessoa, the Portuguese poet. That's what we're going to be having there. So that would be this Tuesday, which is the 28th of November, starting at around about 7 o'clock. And we're usually there right up till midnight.
Well, that's fine. So if people haven't been to that, the Scotia's a lively venue, as you said. In fact, it's one of the ancient
That's
pubs in Glasgow, so it's an ideal place for radical poetry. And okay, that's great, Jim. Well, I'll just call a halt there. I'm sure you've got lots to
smashing.
do today, and I've got to go and put together the rest of this programme. So it's good to see
Yeah,
you, Jim, and thanks
Aye.
for talking to New
Uh,
Scotland. I'll see you
absolute
next
pleasure to
Tuesday.
be here, and sorry about my phone ringing during during the thing. Okay,
That's okay. You can go and deal with your
see
messages
you
now.
then.
Right,
Right.
Jim
Bye
Ferguson.
bye.
Okay, thanks. That was Jim Ferguson, author and poet.